All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Ben Stewart Podcast. I've been away for a little bit. I was in Costa Rica, but today, coming back, this was pretty last minute, but Benny Wills, a friend of mine that I met back in Rotterdam with my wife when my daughter was just born years ago, just came back into my radar, hit me up, was asking how we may collaborate in this new world that we're living in. So Benny Wills, for those of you who don't know, is an acclaimed poet, MC, a YouTube personality, well known for his work on the comedic conspiracy channel JoyCamp. Great stuff. As well as Meme Monday, a weekly show on his personal channel. You may have seen him on the Corbett Report and Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat podcast. He helps fight through the division by communicating more effectively with his online course, Parrhesia, the art of communication. I'm super excited about this one. Without further ado, let's get him straight in here on the Ben Stewart Podcast. All right, here we are. We are back, and we got Benny Wills in the house. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's good to see your face again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, my face squeezed between these two pillars.
My face is really small, and yours is being. There we go.
It's God, man. God does this stuff to us.
Yeah.
God has humor. So we got Gordo in the corner doing all his thing behind the scenes. What's up, Gordo?
So, well, guys, excited to be back. Took a little bit of a trip. Ben, you got reset in Costa Rica?
More than a reset, dude.
That's what I hear.
Plant medicines out the wazoo when I planned on just going down there to work. And yeah, man. I mean, maybe we could talk a little bit about plant medicines and you know, what they do to the mind, the bowels, the purging, you know, the fun stuff and the not so fun stuff. But to stay on point, man, in Rotterdam, this would have been, my daughter was still crawling. So this would have been 2016 or maybe late 2015.
It was 2016 for sure, because it was right before I met my wife.
That's right. So in Rotterdam, you were traveling through Europe, and Max Egan connected with me and said, yo, you really need to meet this guy, Benny Wills. And I always listen when Max Egan talks or wants to connect me with somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure exactly if I know how you and he met. I know that you both been on Anarchapulco or something like that. That might have been after we met, but go ahead and tell me how you met Max.
Well, we had actually just met ourselves. So I had been, I mean, there's a really long version of the story. I'll try to keep it to the bullet points, but I found my way to southern Spain because I had planned an ill-fated vacation with a former girlfriend that we broke up right before we were going to go on this big, you know, romantic trip through Europe. But I still had the ticket and I couldn't refund it. So I ended up connecting with a guy named Zen Gardner. Anybody knows that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we went on a road trip from southern France all the way down to southern Spain, where Max flew in from Peru. And we just were thrust into a situation together where we spent like 10 days together, Max and I. And it was awesome. We really bonded. And then I was really trying to avoid going back to Southern California because I, at that moment, was really in a moment of reflection and trying to figure out what direction I wanted to take my life. And so I decided to stay in Europe for a while, and I went traveling through Holland and up to Sweden. And when I was staying with a friend in Nijmegen, Holland, I took the train over to Rotterdam to meet you. And that's like the really short version. But yeah, so Max and I just met. And then Max actually came back to Southern California after that trip and lived with me for 4 months. And then he moved with me into my then girlfriend's house. And he was like our housemate for a better part of a year. We became very close.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that part of the story. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So that was right as the world started handing my ass to me, showing me what having kids is like. That's a whole rite of passage in and of itself.
True.
So I met you right before you met your wife. So that was before you had kids.
Yes.
I think it's interesting. You know, when we make these plans, I think it said, there's this one quote, you want to make God laugh, tell him what your plans are. And it's funny because you had that trip planned out, you had a ticket and everything, and then just fate threw you in a different direction. And then shortly thereafter, you met your now wife, whom you have kids with.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. I make that joke all the time about plans. They fall apart. So I try to set intentions rather than make firm plans, because my plans literally change 100% of the time. So,
dude, have you done plant medicines?
What's that?
Have you done plant medicine ceremonies?
I've done a lot of plant medicine.
I want to talk about that. Actually,
Okay.
we'll get into the comedy, we'll get into the good shit,
it.
but I want to talk about what's fucked you up.
Okay. You want me to start?
Go. Yeah, okay, I mean,
well,
let us know about your experience.
Ayahuasca. I've done ayahuasca 13 times. That's like my big one.
Wow.
But I found my way to ayahuasca. I mean, again, this is like my life. I can tell you my whole life story about how I've had these different breakthroughs in my own consciousness and sort of connecting with God. In my 20s, I've always been a seeker of truth. And throughout my 20s, I was trying to find it through other substances like mushrooms and acid. I was going to Burning Man every year for, I think, 7 years. And at that time, I really thought that crew was the more likely group to wake up to things, only to find out later that it was the exact opposite. But yeah, so I was always seeking.
Man.
What's that?
There's a lot of Kool-Aid at Burning Man, but cool people and Kool-Aid. So,
well, just people. I was surprised at just the lack of sincere truth seeking there. It was. It almost felt like people were going there as a pressure release valve. I mean, for instance, like in 2016, that's the same year that we met. That was an election year. And on Facebook, I announced that I wasn't voting. That simple. I wasn't like picking a side. I was saying I'm going to stay home and not vote because I don't want to vote for one of these two candidates. And I was so reamed by my peers, particularly the Burning Man folks. They were the ones who were the most obnoxious and cruel to me just because I decided not to vote. So these burners who are going to this place that's like escaping society where there's no government in essence, and they were the ones who were the most government loving of all. It was very bizarre. It was a real wake up call for me. And I got out and I stopped going to Burning Man after that.
So I would love to know just a little bit more about like what, because I want to weave this into how you do your art, which is incredible, and why you use comedy. But like with ayahuasca, only if ayahuasca was what maybe gave you some of your deepest insights of yourself, what through plant medicines might have been your deepest self-revealing insights that have come through the medicine?
Sure. I think the most clarifying thing I got out of ayahuasca, I mean, there was a lot, but the most significant one, I think, was realizing or learning or being honest with myself to the point where I understood totally that I needed to get out of the acting business. You know, I was an actor in LA and I was doing rather well. But I was kind of kidding myself I was justifying it, I should say, justifying my participation in that world. And ayahuasca was like a wake up call, slap in the face to show me like, what are you doing, man? This is not the place for you, and you know it. So that was like the biggest one. And it really rocked my world, and it left me very vulnerable. And it took me a couple of years to leave Los Angeles once I had that realization, but I couldn't shake it. I knew that I did not want to be a participant in the Hollywood machine. And that was probably the biggest one. And on top of that, actually, this is probably even more significant. I mean, it really helped me find God, if I'm being honest. Like that, it really opened me up to my source creator. I've been seeking truth, and like I said, trying things like acid and mushrooms, and really trying to, understand this experience more clearly. And all that was like almost like I don't know, kid stuff compared to what I got from ayahuasca. And that really sort of, I don't know, it was profound. It helped me find God. So I have mixed feelings about ayahuasca even, because I see I see a lot of people who don't have those kinds of experiences, or like kind of similar to the Burning Man thing. But for me, it really helped me stop being sort of agnostic, but made me actually a believer in God.
Yeah, dude, I feel you. And, you know, like everyone has their own interpretation of what the word God means. I would say ayahuasca really helped me not really care about the lost in translation of that word. There's sometimes I use it when I know people get uncomfortable with it, or they want to philosophically rant against it or whatever. And, you know, I acknowledge that whatever the word God means is something beyond all conception, but it is something that you can have a felt sense for. And that's the only thing that I absolutely know. And
well said. Agreed.
Yeah, man. And you, to the point about ayahuasca, you're absolutely right. I think most people who are genuinely looking to heal or expand or become better, step into their potential deeper, they're the ones who have the real, like, humbling experiences rather than the messianic experiences. Like, oh my God, I am this and I am that. Right. And I even recently just had this, holy fuck, I'm a dragon. You know, like I had that experience, but I was at least cognizant enough to know that that is just something that you can harness. It's not something that I truly am, and I step in and out of that. So anyway, like I definitely noticed that in the ayahuasca crowds, a lot of it is just it's almost like a dick measuring contest where it's like, who had the bigger peak experience? Like who's gone deeper? Who's gone farther? Who saw God more? Who saw God first? Who's been doing it longer? And you know,
and also just the weird state loving, like authority worship. Like, yeah, okay, I'm still on the mailing list, for instance, for the retreat that I would attend, and the shaman who runs it. I mean, it became I hesitate to say the word, but you know, stabby, waxing, you know, mandatory waxing for ayahuasca ceremonies. The same place I used to go, and I'm like, how do you understand something? How are you so in tune with this like spiritual, beautiful truth of reality and beyond, and yet are completely being fooled in this other way? That's been really, I mean, I can't even really make sense of it. It's just beyond confusing to me.
I've seen the same thing in ayahuasca ceremonies, in many plant medicine ceremonies, specifically about that same thing. Yep. And in fact, I won't get, you know, deep into it, but there's also this thing about, and I understand this is more complex and nuanced than I'll be able to explain in the following couple sentences. There's your 18-month-old, right?
Oh, you can hear him.
He's chiming in. He's
ready for him. He might be ready for a second nap today.
Hold my beer, guys.
I haven't gotten my second nap. I think I'm gonna start bitching.
I haven't got my first now. I've been up since 5:15.
Oh, dude, that's nothing.
We're having a dad off.
Try
this is a dad off in here. You guys are having a dad off here.
Exactly.
Oh man, yeah.
Who has less sleep, bro?
Who's been up longer?
I'm just dude, honestly, not to divert from this topic, but like this is the thing. Parenting is its own, like you said, it's a rite of passage. It's its own, man. It's a whole other level of like spiritual growth, and also just learning about yourself. But the sleep aspect, you cannot prepare for what it does to your sleep, and you can't really prepare for how you have to help your kids figure out how to fall asleep. Like it's a whole new, that's to me, for us, it's been by far the hardest aspect of being a parent is figuring out how to put our son to sleep and how then we also get sleep. Like it's been crazy hard.
Well, as an outsider, I'm curious, do you guys think this is going to be something we talk about in 2050, you know, maybe longer, when we look back on and go, man, if we just known this one little thing was happening? Or do you think this is inevitably till the end of time going to be parents are just, this is part of the process, you're going to be sleep deprived?
I think community, man. I think this didn't happen in tribes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I wonder if they looked into this.
I think with more information. I mean, that's something I've learned is that you don't, I mean, further showing that just the education system is ridiculous. I mean, we don't really learn much about life and what's required of us and skills that could help us navigate. You have to, you know, if there was more of a conversation, if there was more of a, like you said, a communal feel where you share your wisdom and share your ideas, and like, you're not just going into it blind. I feel like I went into being a parent totally green. I had no idea what I was getting with. I don't have younger siblings. You know, I don't have a big family. I hadn't ever really held a baby before I had one. So it's all been brand new. Our second son now, who's a month old, he's sleeping like a champ. And I think it's because we know what we're doing a little better now. I know it is, but
well, that's definitely, I feel, a huge part of it, but also, I don't want to call it a burden, but in community, I would imagine back in the day, there'd be maybe a different shift, sort of like, okay, it's your shift, but I'm wide awake to take care of your baby while I go get a nap, you know?
Uncles,
I mean, this is,
takes a village, right? That's what they say.
Friends, mom gets to sleep, and the grandma's there, and the aunties and the uncles, and people can watch the kids, and there's so much more personal interaction. They had their huts or their teepees open. There weren't locks on the doors. They weren't distrustful of their neighbors. Like, that's what's missing today. Like, my wife and I talk about this all the time, is we have tons of people around us. None of them, and by them and also our conditioning, we don't go to them and say, hey, you know, we're really tired. Can you watch our kid for a little bit? There's this thing where it's like, you have to know your neighbors for, like, some places you have to know them for like 10, 15 years before they're close enough to you. So I think it's where we've come as a society, this whole sleep thing. And man, when I was in boot camp, the whole thing, the worst part of it wasn't getting yelled at or having to do like push-ups and all the folding of the clothes. The worst part was not getting enough sleep. So I mean,
everything
it's
everything
torture.
is
it's a
harder
form of
when
torture.
you're sleep deprived.
I mean,
Everything
sleep
is harder when you're
deprivation
sleep
is a
deprived.
form of torture. Like, that's like, so there you go. I mean, that's kind of point in case. But
I became an insomniac. And this is like something I'm ashamed to admit, because I've been like a professional sleeper my whole life. But I got so anxious the first year of my son's life, I stopped being able to sleep, because he would go to bed and I know that he'd be waking up throughout the night, and then there's an alarm clock when he wakes up in the morning. And I was like, okay, now is my chance to sleep. So I was like, okay, go to bed. But I'd be in my head, I'm like, well, he's going to wake up any minute. He's going to wake up to feed. He's going to, you know, I knew that a cry was coming. So I just became totally neurotic about it. And I literally, some nights I couldn't sleep at all because I was so stressed out.
Right.
And again, I'm ashamed of that, because I've always been such a good sleeper, but I definitely struggled with literally insomnia last year, my first year being a parent.
Well, it shows you somebody who's even a professional sleeper, which, how does one become a professional sleeper? That's my follow-up. But also, I think, you know, the solution I see is, and I think, Ben, you can maybe speak to this, in, I don't know if you're just Denmark or Holland, certain like Scandinavian nations, they were doing this more of the community would work together. They'd all live in one large apartment complex, and they would design, you know, taking care of clothes, taking care of kids. And, you know, I've had a friend who grew up in a commune. I'm not saying we have to do some sort of like commune style, but the stuff that Kyle and Aubrey are talking about, this more modern way of how do we modernize these pragmatic ways where we come together more and be more collaborative to have, you know, and this could be used for a lot of things, but basically, if you had a tight niche of community of people who were basically on some sort of schedule or strong communication about this, I could see this not only working to where more parents had better, you know, less sleep deprivation, but you could also create more bonds. You know, it also, you bond more because you're helping take care of each other's children. You know, what better way to be like, you know, I got your back. Like, thanks for doing me a solid.
Yeah, you know, the only thing I'll add to that is that if you look at the way that we view communal living, we have these words that are very dangerous now. You know, like, communism, it's in that word for sure, right, but that's economic driven. Communal living, or living on a commune, everyone has these ideas like, what are you doing? You're all in open relationships, sharing herpes and doing drugs. And is there a cult leader
Star
that's
Indigo.
marrying all the women and having kids with all of them? Like, I'm not saying that hasn't happened in the past, but the fact that the majority of people believe that when you say communal living or living in a community is some kind of a drug taking sex cult.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like it's exactly what the mainstream media does with the left and the right. And I will say right now, there are and the left that I really appreciate. And the most people I know that are on the left or on the right, they're fairly intelligent people. And what's happening is very insidious psychological programming that makes the left think that the right is exactly like the bottom 2% of the most disgusting and annoying part of them. That represents all of them. And the same thing with how the right views the left and the left views the right. We view the other side as the bottom 2%. Look, they're all stupid. They all believe this. They all do this. They all say that. And the majority of people are just ones who are like, I'm not gonna voice my shit out on social media. And when they don't voice their shit out on social media, then all we see are either the most outspoken, brilliant people, which get attacked the most, or the bottom of the barrel, most unintelligent, most triggered people out there. So that's all I'll say about the community thing. I actually want to like dive into something that's as old as time, as far as old as civilization, going all the way back to tribes. And that is, as you look at all of them, every single one of them has art. Every single one of them had theater, plays, and they had ways of telling facts in the very V for Vendetta way, like using lies or let's say just mythological, truths to tell the truth of life. And so I want to drill this into the Benny, what you've been doing. I loved JoyCamp, dude. I fucking loved JoyCamp. And I loved it because there really weren't that many people that were legitimately talking about conspiracies without having the intention to poke fun at them, but actually using comedy to soften it up. There weren't that many shows out there. And I want to know like a little bit, tell us about JoyCamp. Tell us about how that started and what the intention was, what the deepest intention, like what was the impact you wanted to have on humanity?
Sure. Well, the original intention was to participate. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about me meeting Max Egan and becoming his friend is I was a devout listener before I met him, and it was synchronicity that brought us together. But I listened to Max's show, for instance, every episode up until I met him, and beyond, of course. But he was like the only person I listened to regularly. And people like him and people like David Icke, when I was in college, part of their message was always, you have to participate. You can't just sit on the sidelines. So JoyCamp initially came from that. Like that was a strong intention. My friend Kevin and I, who I started JoyCamp with, we were tired of just observing and we wanted to do something. And it took us a while to figure out how we could contribute, but we finally kind of stumbled into it because we made a funny little video that was just for us. And because we're good at our particular skills, and I studied acting for 20 years and we have a master's degree in acting, and Kevin was an editor and a director, and we're both writers, but we just didn't realize for years that we could apply our talents to, waking people up. So we made a funny video called Conspiracy Theorist PSA that was just a gag, but it turned out so well. We were like, oh my gosh, like this is really good. Hey, you know what? Maybe we could try doing this more. And because if you look at it, like the truth scene is seriously lacking a sense of humor. Maybe we could be the guys who bring a little humor to the equation. So we leaned into it and we really went all in for like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years. And yeah, it was birthed from that. And it was the perfect coalescence of our skills and our knowledge and our, ongoing quest for truth.
Dude, I love that. I love that. And so around what year was that?
We launched JoyCamp 10 years ago, 2012.
Damn.
Yeah. And that video you're just showing a little clip from, so now at 10 years later, because a lot of these videos are more relevant now than they were back then. So I'm actually turning the one-off videos into sort of episodes and making compilations out of the JoyCamp material, sort of give them a new life, and to, just honor the work and get them to new, fresh eyes, because it's good stuff.
And so you also did like a spoken word poem at Anarchapulco, was it?
I've done a lot of poems at
done a lot of them,
yeah.
Yeah. I really liked that one. There was this one specifically at Anarchapulco that I saw that you did really well. It was both funny and very poignant. It really, it also didn't lack on material that touches the why does this matter? I'm not just going to poke fun at it. There's a deeper, why does this matter? And it was also empowering. What I liked about that was, as a filmmaker, I never entered filmmaking just to talk about conspiracy. I really didn't, even though that's primarily what I started talking about.
Yeah.
I did it because I knew that empowering people, it takes a full arc, like a full story arc. And, in movies, any story, there's some kind of conflict. It's either man versus world, man versus nature, or man versus himself. And in today's world, person versus the world, person versus nature, and person versus him or her and all those other selves. So with that, the way that I decided to do it was to reach inside people's why. Why should I care to empower myself? Oh, well, haven't you heard? And I go through and I list all these things that, the world's not what you thought it was. The government and all governments aren't altruistic. They don't have your best intentions in mind. And in fact, the deeper you look, they have not even just selfish intentions in mind. They're not just in it for themselves. So I noticed that in your spoken word, you touched upon all of that. Is that just something that came naturally, or what was your process of building your craft and finding your voice, if you will, as an artist in this territory?
Well, so I'm a performer, it's part of who I am since I was a little kid. And I started getting invited to speak at events in 2015. And the first one I spoke at, I gave a speech because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And I think I gave a fine speech. I called it "You Are the Cure." And I'd just done a ayahuasca ceremony, so I was really I was in that headspace. And it went over well because I think I'm a good stage presence. I know how to keep an audience engaged. But as I was doing it, I thought, there are enough people here who are experts at what they do, and they can give you a better. I don't consider myself an expert in anything, any one subject, I guess, but I am a good performer. So when I got invited to speak again, I decided to try something fresh. I had been writing poetry personally as a way to help distill down my thoughts and, have some fun and make, more palatable presentations. Just really organize my thoughts, really is what it was. And I decided to perform poetry I'd written without telling anybody. I just used my speaking slot and went up there and decided to perform poetry, and knowing full well that I might get booed off the stage. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not even a big fan of poetry personally. And I know that there's sort of a stigma against poetry, which is deservedly so, because I think modern poetry pretty much, it kind of sucks. But I decided to lean into it, and it was not only well received, but it was really well received. I got 3 standing ovations in my 45 minutes set. And I thought, okay, this is validating. I'm going to step into this further. So I really leaned into the poetry. And then for the next 3 or 4 years, I got invited to perform at conferences and events all over the world. And it was really exciting. So that, again, it sort of just emerged. It was just, I I took a chance, I took a risk, and it paid off.
That's amazing. So at what point, because I really, this is one of the main things that I liked in the intro that I gave was Parrhesia, the art of communication. And eventually I want you to weave in there, like, what element of communication does humor work best with? And first, just explain to us what Parrhesia is, and if I'm pronouncing it correctly, for one. And I definitely want to touch upon, like, the element of humor and keeping it light in that sense.
Yeah, well, some people would say that Parrhesia is the way to say it. I call it Parrhesia personally, but I may be wrong. But I just love the word itself. The word means free speech. It means to speak freely or boldly. And not only that, it means to speak truth to power, which I also appreciate. And this is, so from JoyCamp to poetry to Parrhesia, this is like my next big endeavor where I'm helping people become better communicators through what I've learned as a, lifetime communicator. And it's going really well. I'm doing it for a year and a half. So 3 seasons, I'm about to start my 4th season, and the results are pretty incredible. But to answer your question about humor, we found with JoyCamp that you can penetrate through programming better with laughter than you can with anything else, because when people are laughing, their guard is down, their defenses are down. And we started getting feedback from our JoyCamp videos saying, your video helped me bridge the gap between me and my sister. And we haven't spoken in years. And I showed them your chemtrail video, and now we're talking again. Like, we were seeing this happen and experiencing it. And it was just proving to us that laughter is disarming, and laughter is, or can really help people to listen. And beyond that, just an artistic presentation. I've learned this through the poetry. When you take your thoughts that you could have a conversation with, all your opinions and ideas, and you really like whittle them down into a palatable artistic presentation, people are much more willing to listen and experience it than they would be with a conversation. So I've definitely seen through comedy and through poetry and just art in general how effective they can be as a means of communication and getting through to people. So that's why I'm all about it. I mean, I've lived it. I've seen it work.
Well, I think a lot of people in this community, if they're fans of Ben, have experienced that feeling of truly wanting to have a dialogue with somebody about something they're very passionate about in this space, and just feeling very rejected, or feeling like they had maybe an opportunity, but they really approached it in a way that just made the other person feel like, dude, I'm just trying to chill and have a drink at the beach or at a party, or they just didn't understand the set and setting. And I had to really learn the hard way by just some of my good friends. I remember basically just at times we'd have these long talks, but at times they were basically just like, hey man, let's just play some volleyball and chill. Like, we don't need to talk about like some ontological deep
We've all
thing
been there.
Or extraterrestrial life. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm fucking,
Exactly.
I'm burning with too much here. And I would see it when I worked in finance, all the guys, we'd call them green thumbs. You'd get in and they're like, oh, I want to talk equity. I want to talk this company. It's like, hey man, that's great and all, but like, once you let's settle in, there's always this rush of something you're excited about when you first learn it. So I always thought too of just the psychological element. And I remember thinking like, man, we just, and the levity and the humor makes total sense to me, because I would always think we need somebody who's like a psychologist too, to help people understand how to like process these things and then articulate it in a way. And it was just like, I don't know if it's psychologist, but I just saw how it didn't matter what you said. It was how you were saying it, right? Or it was just what you were maybe
Timing
getting
and
off.
placement.
Yeah, and setting and all these little subtle things. So it makes total sense to me that there was a lane for somebody like yourself to say, hey, like, this is a big issue, and I think there's not really a need. There's something's not meeting this. There's no one really helping instruct people. And humor to me has been a huge tool that I've used since, to be like, look, maybe self-deprecating. Maybe I don't fucking know. I'm just, in a meat suit floating through space on a ball, or what do I know? You gotta let down that guard to be like, you got to be self-deprecating and humorous, because then people will open it up. But what are some of, just for subtle little pragmatic tips, what are some of the things you've told people that some of our audience could use as far as just like subtle little cues maybe to read from people and ways to maybe initiate more fluidly
with conversation?
Yeah, and these kind of topics that are a little bit more also
that's
sensitive.
Good. I mean, that's why I created the course, because I mean, I created the course as a result of the lockdown, with the pandemic that hit. I knew, based on my experience, that the bigger the event, the more people start to question things. And in addition to that, of course, division is one of the goals. Polarization is one of the goals, and you're seeing it now more than ever. And I refuse to accept that as part of my life. Like, I don't want to lose relationships because we have different opinions, which is, I think, one of the goals here.
Definitely.
But people who are just starting to question things, as someone who's been there before, you tend to get too emotional in these conversations. So when the topic comes up, you're too hot. You come on too strong. And we think that speaking the truth or standing up for truth or just like speaking your mind is the right thing, because as long as you're saying the truth and it's correct. Well, if you're doing more damage by doing that, if you're creating more distance between the person you're fire hosing with information, between them and the topic, then you're actually making it worse. They're actually less likely now to look into what you want them to look into because you came on too strong. So how do you keep that in check? How do you keep your emotions at bay? And how do you avoid the landmines that are everywhere now? I mean, now the person who's watching TV, they have triggers. So if you say one thing, they'll be like, oh, this guy is a flat earther, 9/11, Alex Jones, Sandy Hook. Like, I know everything about this guy now because he's questioning vaccine. So you have to be really careful.
There's a box.
And I think, yes, exactly. So I think there's lots of tactics to take. Keeping your emotions in check is a huge one. But I think just listening is important, asking questions, and getting on the same page, building a rapport. I mean, that might be the most important. You have to establish trust. If you're going to embark in a conversation about a difficult subject with someone, they have to know that your priorities are in the same place, that you both want the same thing, that you're on the same team. You can't come at it as an aggressor, like defense. You got to play offense with them. So they have to trust that you are on their side, I think, first and foremost. And then you really just have to, it's like a dance. You have to, work with what you're given, and not, if they show interest a little bit, you can't bombard them with too much. You have to like take it slow. And I mean, the course is 10 weeks. So it's like really get intricate and step by step with it. But there's certain basic elements, building rapport, listening, asking questions, and then knowing when to back off and just let it sit, because people aren't necessarily going to change their minds in the conversation with you or in one day. I mean, it takes time for people to like put pieces together. They have to choose it. They have to want to have a change of heart.
There's this urgency that comes in with trying to tell people everything, like, this is my chance. They're listening. This is the best opportunity. So I'm going to lay it all out. And it kind of violates the plant a seed and then water it, and don't force it. Don't force anything out of it. And one aspect that I also realize is, I've seen people as well as myself go through many iterations of like, but I still want to communicate this stuff, and like backing off, and then realizing I don't like backing off. I want to tell people what's on my mind, but I don't want to push people away. What I've noticed is you're totally right, Benny. Listening is very, very key, because when people, like, we do speak our minds, but what we speak out of our minds, especially in casual conversation, it's not because we want something, if we're being casual, other than we just want to chill. We want to hang out. We want to connect. And then when you feel that somebody's in there, like, almost being an evangelist for conspiracy, then you're like, yeah, dude, but you know what I mean? You're a telemarketer.
Let's just have some lunch. Yeah, I mean,
you're here trying to sell me something. We're here trying to connect as humans, and you're here trying to sell me something. So even when you try and get, and I've met people that like they're good at the beginning, but eventually they can't help themselves, and the diatribe or the lecture starts coming out. Like, dude, we were just talking.
Exactly.
Now you're lecturing, and you can see it switch in their eyes when it's like, man, we were having such a good conversation, and then all of a sudden this thing turned on where it's like, I have to lecture you. I need to lay down this wisdom and this knowledge. And even if they hide it, if they found clever ways of hiding it, so they start kind of masking it or disguising what they're really saying,
right?
Everyone can tell. You don't have to be well read on the subject to tell this person wants something now. He wants validation of his beliefs. And even though like on the surface, this person thinks they're really like intelligent and well-read, what I can tell beneath the surface is they want validation. And it's like, I'm not here for that, man. I'm not here to validate your thoughts and your beliefs. I always put it as like, I remember it being at parties when everyone was just telling dick and fart jokes, and I was the one in the corner talking about Building 7, right? You know, like, you know, I didn't even have to have buggy eyes or be like talking.
Yeah.
It's just, I felt it, and I noticed it every single time when people, their interest would switch, and the entire group, I was talking, and like 5 people would start looking at each other, trying to find a way to get the hell out of there. And I was just like, and if I didn't say anything, if I didn't call myself out, then it felt even more awkward. So I would just call myself out, like, yo, sorry, I went there again. And I would just slam my beer and shut up. Well, and they would laugh, and we would move on.
You know what's so interesting about this too, Benny, is your background in comedy, and I look at also the evolution of somebody like Joe Rogan, who's very much in this space, and you look at his early podcasts, he was very much more like, dude, I'm telling you this. He was lecturing. He was talking at his friends and guests. Now, as an older, wiser host, he still is well-versed on this stuff, but he's asking questions. He's not, attached to his ideas. He always says that. He's like, I'm not attached to my ideas. I'm always fluid. And it doesn't mean you can't be passionate, believe your things, but it's when you let your identity become your ideas, become your identity. And he talks about this a lot. And I think this is why people love him. People love him because of this. He's so good at not being attached to ideas and holding space for some people. And the last thing is with comedians, it makes total sense. You guys, your whole thing is read the room. You know how to read your audience very well. Like, who else has been trained in our society to do this almost this well? Comedians are all about reading their audience, reading the room, knowing what's working well with material in a sense. But it's just a different form of material, essentially. But it's like, is it resonating or not? It's similar with professors, but comedians, I think, are even better because you're in the trenches a lot more.
Right. Yeah. You have to be mindful of your audience. I mean, it's just obvious. And think about it like energetically. Okay, when you think back to a significant conversation or an encounter you have with a person, you cannot recall exactly what was said. You can remember like some words, the essence of the conversation, but what you do remember is what you felt from the person, and you remember how you felt in the situation. So therefore, it's absolutely of paramount importance to be aware of the dynamic and be self-aware of how you're behaving and how you're treating the person. And, if you're just talking at them, like you just said, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, there's a character I play on the JoyCamp videos called the conspiracy guy, which is a mockery of myself, because that's who I am, or who I was, I should say. That's who I was. And I had to learn how to not be that guy, the guy who's just like, everything's back to the conspiracy. And whether or not you're right or not, you may be right about all of it. But if you're an a-hole about about how you present it or how you engage with people about it, then it doesn't matter how right you are. It doesn't matter how much of an advocate for truth you are. You're just being an a-hole.
You're not building a bridge, which is ultimately what we want to do. That's what we're
building bridges. That's my key.
Yeah. And I'm like,
that's
dude,
my motto.
We're just burning it if you're doing it that way.
Well, this is really, such a valuable point, because what we're talking about when we're talking about community, this thing that's missing for most of the world now, which was inherent in the old world. The interesting thing about that is communication is like community building exercise.
Exactly.
And by understanding, like, I think people are still caught up, a lot of people, and myself included. What's that?
It's in the name, community. I mean, communication. You can't have
exactly.
community without communication.
And so, like, what I kind of feel is a lot of people are, I used to consider myself a truth seeker, but while I still find myself to be that, my understanding of what that means broadened so much, because I really didn't realize how little I had parsed through what is my truth and what is a truth outside of me. So my truth is valid, and this is how I speak my voice. This is how I'm authentic to me. But when I acknowledge that everybody's in a different space, and also not everybody needs to believe in conspiracy or needs to believe the things that I believe. So by speaking my truth, in one way, I'm just communicating what I find to be true. But all that means is I'm projecting myself. I'm showing people who I am. I'm revealing of my mind in those moments. But there's like this bigger truth, which is it contextually relevant? And is it community building? So I find that, like, truth, a lot of people are like, well, did it factually happen or not? Well, that's not even really truth, because I feel like resonance is probably a better word, because, like, is it resonant? And usually the most resonant stuff that I've found is you can speak your mind, but if you know how to, and it's different than cleverness, it's artistry. If you know how, like, improv works, and really improv is knowing, like, there are good jokes, but there's the right timing of the right jokes. And if you miss the timing, then, like, a snare drum in a song is awesome, but if you miss the timing, it sucks. Right? So
and in acting, what's the number one rule of improv?
Always say yes.
Yes and.
Yes and.
Yes and. That's the
Yes,
number
and.
one rule in improv.
Which is a way of not resisting what's coming at you, but redirecting it so you're not trying to hold it. Like in the Tao, you're not trying to hold reality. You're just redirecting it and making it available immediately for play. Let's play with words. Let's play with this energy, with this communication. And that's when I found, like, the absolute best conversations I've ever had are when people aren't trying to hold the microphone too long, right? They know that it's about punctuality. It's about timing. It's about the right thing, but not monologuing, not going on forever. And I found that to be probably the number one thing that conspiracy theorists, they feel like, oh, well, shit, I read this entire David Icke book, and in this conversation, I'm going to try and recite it all. Like, no, dude, you're gonna blow them away, and literally they're going to want the hell out of that room after 2 minutes of that. If you just find the one right thing to say in the right way, and then you back off it, or maybe make a joke, or what the hell do I know, then it allows for them not to feel like they need to validate you for this belief that you have. They realize that you're comfortable just having your belief, and then, but still deeper beneath that, you just want to have a good moment. You want to have a good shared moment. So I think that's kind of been deeper than just truth seeking, is real resonance.
Totally. Well, you and I are in a similar boat, and I think this is coming from just now decades of trying to harness this craft of connection through communication and, conveying important ideas that we think are important in a way that people can actually listen and hear them. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time.
We actually have a really good question. Sorry, relative to this. I just saw that it just popped up from Maria that I think would be a good one. Is how do you try to be, I'll just do it verbatim. Awesome combo. I would love to know how to be authentic / true to myself / do it in a fun way when someone close to you is being judgmental plus critical.
Well, when people ask questions like that, I always say it's important to have context. So it's hypothetical situations is not this is necessarily that hypothetical, but hypothetical situations are difficult to give clear answers on, because all dynamics, all encounters are unique to those individuals. So what are the circumstances of the, if you're trying to approach the judgmental person, like if you're initiating it, that's its own thing. If it's coming up naturally or whatever, like everything requires context. So it just depends on the topic and your relationship and, what's being talked about already.
Should you wait? Should you even try not to in that moment, or just wait till you think they're in a better moment when they're being less critical?
Well, let's go. Let's ask her. What's more? Okay, give me more context. Like, what made the person judgmental? What are they talking about? What is the scenario?
And while she's writing that in there, the thing that comes to me, and maybe you could speak to this, Benny, is when you are confident and in your center. And there's many ways to work on this, but when you truly are in your center, there's less that you feel like you need to defend against. So when somebody's being judgmental, it's like when you are more confident about who you are, then you can allow the other person to have their beliefs, and maybe you could even say like, yo, you're coming across like a little like a rigid box, like you think you know exactly what's going on inside me, and you can be open and honest about that, but without getting too hot and heavy and turning it into an argument. I think it's more about how centered are you in yourself and confident, because I have a public persona where I get judged all the time, and I've actually found the best outcomes to those moments are the moments that I don't defend myself, but I actually hear them and I say, I can see what you're saying and I feel you. And if there's really something obvious that I could be like, actually, I meant it like this, I still try and make it like, but I hear you. And that's a valid point. And so like, that's usually when I'm in my center, right. And I have.
Yeah. And like you're saying, I mean, not trying to take your emotion out of the opinion. So we've already kind of said this earlier, but we, for whatever reason, we live in our culture, society, whatever, we have been groomed in a way to think our opinions represent not only who we are, but our level of intelligence. So when your opinions are threatened, we get defensive because we don't want to be seen as weak or uninformed or ignorant. So we hold on to them. So and then the person you're talking to is also experiencing that. So you have to like be mindful of maybe they seem defensive or judgmental, but there's also like this sort of, how do I say it, like inner child essence where they are getting super defensive because they don't want to be seen as weak. Yeah. They don't want to be seen as, well, they know less than you, or they're not in the know.
And really deep down, that's saying, you might respect me less or like me less.
Exactly.
If I'm a girl, that I want you to like me, or if I'm a mother, I want you to have my respect, or a father or a friend. Like there's deep rooted stuff to that. Then we're usually just seeing the surface level of it, because to be that real and deep and honest is already hard enough. So
one of my keys is just being casual and literally standing next to the opinion. So even if I do hold it myself, sometimes if it's like a new environment, if I'm just feeling someone out or whatever, I will bring up the idea or the opinion as an opinion and say this, well, there's some people who think that this, or there's another school of thought that suggests, and you can even say like, I'm not saying that I believe this, I'm just saying that it exists. You're acknowledging that it exists, but not owning it, so that they can get, if they get mad or whatever, triggered, they're triggered at the opinion. They're not triggered at the person. And that has helped me immensely when I can just sort of stand side by side, because I also know in my heart that most of what we believe, if not all, but most, is a level of trust. No matter who you are or what you believe, like all information that we take as truth is on a certain level, like a level of I trust that this is true based off of my experience, based off of the resources available. But it's so hard to really know, like, I don't know, the particular, the real truth about a lot of stuff. But you can, like you said, it can resonate in a way like, this is probably accurate, but I think that makes sense.
Maria gave us a little more context. She said, say
Okay.
they're asking because they want to know more of what you're talking about, and they just are in a place of trying to make you feel like you are crazy, nutty, etc. Be right, plus stuck in their ways.
Well, if they're interested, that's big, because my experience is that most people don't really want to know what you think, and certainly they don't want to learn from you. People don't, again, because it's an ego thing, they don't want you to be their teacher, especially about a topic that they have a very strong opinion on.
Or if you're younger.
So if they're being condescending, I mean, if you're feeling that energy from them, like they're being combative or condescending, rude, how much do you really want to like dig in anyway? I mean, I think taking Ben's approach of just saying like, hey, I hear you, and distill things down to their essence. I think that also really helps. So for instance, if you're caught in a debate about, the jabby, don't get lost in the particulars of like these particular side effects and these percentage of people, and you're likely to experience this or whatever it is. Just bring it back down to distill it down to its essence of like, well, this, I've arrived at a conclusion that makes me not want to take the risk of getting into my body. I'd rather say, and if they say whatever they say, if you're confident in who you are, then you just say, okay, well, I hear you, and I'm just gonna keep figuring it out for myself.
She said you were answering perfectly. Thank you. Prayer hands twice, hearts. Excellent. Going to definitely listen and take notes. So
cool.
Yeah.
I think she felt fulfilled. And I think I really like how you said too. Sorry, Ben. But I really like too how you said not making it feel like it's your idea, but making it feel like you're standing next to it, and more it's like, hey, have you thought about this? Like Socratically, like, have you pondered this? Because that's another thing that I found is if you can sort of incept them to make it feel like it's their idea, or what about this? And you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, But you give them breadcrumbs versus
exactly all your the goal should be to like allow them to see that there's a door available, and not to open it for them necessarily, or definitely not to push them through it. Just if they walk out of the conversation now with a door that they can at some point choose to walk through and explore, then you've won.
Was this in a movie?
And if you're okay not getting the credit, another thing, again, ego.
I'll only show you the door.
Take like the acknowledgement out of it. You can't. If you don't have to be the one that they reference, like, well, I didn't know this until I talked to this guy. Like, doesn't matter. All that matters is now that they're thinking a little more.
Exactly.
They're thinking a little outside of their programming. They're asking questions. Like, that's a huge win.
You don't have to take credit. You don't have to take credit. People want to be the ones that are like, oh, I got you there. And I've done that sometimes myself. It's like, it doesn't matter how they get there, as long as they get there. So if it's somebody else or this, like, just
because
as long as we're getting there.
It's a free will experience.
Yeah.
If you're infringing on their free will experience, you're the problem.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I want to say about communication is a lot of communication is it's what you say, it's how you say it, and then it's also like it's how you listen. It really is how well you listen, because the way you listen, and if you really, instead of like cutting them off or hopping in immediately, especially if it's something that could get heated, instead of hopping in immediately, like taking a breath and letting them feel like, okay, I'm heard. And it's not just letting them feel that way. Like that's a way of actually listening, is to take a breath beforehand, let it marinate for a second. Totally. And then, like the less you say sometimes, I like what Benny was saying, like bring it back down to its essence, because if you had to distill it all down to just one thing, and somebody just laid on their entire philosophy and they talked for a while, this happens a lot to me, where there are people, they want to talk philosophy, but they want to talk forever. They just want to keep going and going. And for me, my time is super valuable. I like being with my kids or playing music and stuff like that. What I'll do is I might just distill it down to a single word, like, yeah, maybe, like that's it. Or just like, I don't even say a word, just like, and that keeps them thinking. And that's the best way to like is to keep them curious. Like a lot of times they want more words out of you because they feel comfortable in word land, right? I feel
Yes.
comfortable in word land because I'm so comfortable with words. I've capitalized on how to use words and stuff like that. And then if you just like, yeah. And that's a
Well,
way
That's all
of
you're giving me?
communicating.
That's all you're giving me?
So this is one of my mottos.
Now I'm thinking
is,
all the times you've done that, Ben. I'm like, oh shit.
Oh,
How
I
many
do it
times did he
all the
say
time.
to me?
one of my mottos is think fast, talk slow. And I encourage people to be concise in what they say and direct, because we are, for whatever reason, we are lost. A lot of people get stuck in patterns of using too many words to explain something, or having almost out of body experiences where you start to speak and then you're aware of the people listening, and now you're aware of the room, and you're now on autopilot, sort of watching yourself speak and hoping you arrive at the point you want to make, but you're using a lot of words, a lot of filler words, a lot of uhs and ums and like and all that, and you take so long to get to what you really want to say. So when I say think fast, talk slow, it's really about slowing down your pace, thinking while you're speaking so that you can be clear in how you say what you want to say. It's one of the biggest tricks I got from being a Shakespearean trained actor, because there's no subtext in Shakespeare. Yeah. Everything that's thought is spoken. That's one of like the things about Shakespeare. So you have to not take moments of total silence where you think about the next line, but have that all happening in the moment. So you're thinking fast, but you're letting the words come out slowly. It's a technique, but it really helps.
Yeah, that's interesting. Word economy that's a course that I'm building right now, because I do a lot with voice as well, and I think maybe you and I should talk at some point.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But word economy is really like understanding, like, I mean, all economy it's an exchange of value and being intelligent with it, how to get your, let's say, money to work for you. It's the same thing with your words. Like a lot of people, they are just waiting for their chance to speak. And instead of just judging that, you could also leverage that, find the hidden strength in it, and see, like, they're waiting for their chance to speak. So with word economy, I can plant the best seeds to where they feel satisfied because they're being heard. They get to talk for a while. And I'm on the other side, just gently nudging the conversation or planting seeds along the way with questions, pointed questions that cause them to really like deepen their own self-inquiry on what they believe, but not hard enough to make them feel like they're triggered, because sometimes that is the way to go. And then sometimes that is also just like, that's the easiest way to get people to start closing down rather than really opening up. And I love conversations that sink deeper into the real nuances of what we really want to say. And that comes with Howard Stern, Joe Rogan. They use self-deprecation, but the ways that they get their guests to really open up is by allowing the conversation to breathe, not going into the deep end right away, and finding the thread of how does it want to get there? What causes them to want to relieve some of the armor, because then they're just going to fucking give you gold. And when you give gold and you speak from that really undefensive space, that's when it's most archetypal and mythical. Like everybody can resonate with those deeper truths, even if they have a resistance towards it. They still understand, like, oh, this is real speak. This is when people are really talking to one another.
Mm-hmm. But I think podcast too is one of the new modern art forms that I can't think of anything much better that really helps you to fine-tune this craft. I mean, already the time I've spent with Ben doing this podcast, you become glaringly obvious of how many times I say too much and use fillers or and I'm literally writing notes, stop saying because I watch it and it makes me feel cringy. So, I mean, and Rogan talks about this. It's a great tool. Even if you do podcasts for fun, I would say to people, even if it's just for fun and you're not actually trying to make it a viable economic success, it does help you learn how to be a better conversationalist. All these things you're talking about. So I'll just put that out there too for people to
That's a good point
on.
Well, that's one of the first things I do in the class is have people become aware of what their filler words are, not with the goal of eradicating it completely, because I don't think there's anything wrong with having some connector sounds and words. But if it's a crutch, if it's something that is leaned on too heavily, it can be, it can get in the way. So I help people identify the irony is I have a lot of people from Europe and elsewhere in the world who have English as a second language, and they usually speak more clearly than the English speaking students because they are being so careful with their words. They really are focusing on what they're saying, and they are much more clear as a result. So I'm just getting people in tune with, you're just self-aware. It's, know thyself, and getting people to know what they rely on in order to talk.
Yo, Benny, you got time for one more question? I know you got a couple
of
kids.
I'm good. I think they're both asleep, and it's my time. Yeah.
All right. Well, so I think that the audience would really appreciate when you find yourself in conversation and you acknowledge that you're, let's say, like, you're finding that your heart is racing and that your voice is elevated, and you notice the trigger patterns coming up. What are some of the, for one, like, how do you identify it? Is there any way that you found works to help you identify it as it's happening? And as it happens and you identify it, what are some of the ways to naturally weave it back? Or are there some keys that just unlock it back to its original state that you found?
If you're getting nervous as you embark on a,
or just like, triggered, like if you're noticing that you are starting to get into a space where you're like, whoa, I'm not in my center. You acknowledge it about yourself.
Well, if you have the awareness, like, that's a huge first step. You can even acknowledge and be self-aware in the moment, then you're already on the right track, because you are noticing where your bad habits are. And from there, I think that this is what I try to tell people too. There's no rules. So what I mean by that is you can keep your audience, whether it's one person or 1,000, in on what's going on with you to as much as you feel comfortable. So if you're finding yourself getting, let's say super nervous in a moment, or your heart's starting to beat fast, you can stop and say, I just need to take a second. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. Let me just gather my thoughts. And just by allowing there to be a moment where you recalibrate, the person or people are not going to be offended, first of all, for you doing that. And if anything, it makes you more interesting, because you're actually you're taking the control back. One of my keys is I say a lot out loud, what am I trying to say? As I'm making a point, as I'm on stage or anywhere, I say, what am I trying to say? And just by asking the question out loud to myself, my brain answers the question, and I can usually continue. But same thing with, it's one of my keys to being an MC or a performer or a stage presence in general, is keeping the audience in on it. We're going on the ride together. And if I'm feeling nervous, or if I lose my lines, or if I forget where I'm at, I'll just say it. Like, I forgot where I am. People are like, they usually like it. They like honesty. People like vulnerability. So you're allowed to play with the dynamic in a way that perhaps you've never considered before.
That's super interesting. I just want to make a point about that like, what you're really talking about is usually when there's a conversation and it's getting heated, it's because there's a nerve, there's like a specific spot that's being touched that brings something up to the surface. And when you just for a second or for a moment step outside of that and then humble yourself, and like I've noticed this as well, like, if my wife and I are ever like getting into something heated and then our kid comes up in the middle of it and needs something, we both can chill for a second. Yeah. It's not like it's impossible. We could both be like, I'm sorry, what's up, honey? Sure, yeah, no, it's right over there, go get it. And then usually that's enough of a break to be like, okay,
what are we doing? Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Here's what I think's happening inside of me. And then I just bring it back to me. And she does the same. She's just, like,
exactly.
Bring it back to how can I humble myself in this moment? Because I know this is starting to get heated for both of us. And that's when again, the other party sees that, receives that, and almost always does the same. I've never experienced it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I've never experienced it where the other party doesn't goes like, no, fuck you, and just and then lay right back into it.
Right. And if you're getting in a heated exchange with someone, especially with someone you care about, you can call a timeout and just say, hey, I see what's happening here. I'm feeling really worked up. Listen, I love you. I care about you. And I think we're just on the same page about this subject. But I still care about you. I don't know. It's all details aside.
Let's go smoke a bowl.
I mean, you can call attention and say, I'm sorry. I'm noticing myself getting a little carried away. And I think you may be too. So maybe we just take a breather and just trust that no matter what our opinions are, I'm going to love you no matter what.
And you give them permission. I mean, I think that's, if I'm in that situation and I'm being empathetic here, because I know with certain women, I can think of one in particular, a family member. If I tell her like time out or chill out, it makes her even more mad. So I've learned to just like you're saying, I'm thinking about this now, is basically when you give permission to say like, hey, like, let me think about what I'm saying, or let me check myself. Most people aren't going to continue attacking. So it then gives them permission to check themselves. Inherently, you're going, hey, like, I need to maybe step back and think about what I'm doing. And then maybe they go, you know what? Maybe I should too. I mean, I feel like there's a little bit of permission granted to them to also give themselves that space.
I'd say then don't make sure it's not you putting them in timeout.
Exactly.
You're saying I need a second.
Yeah.
Just because I want to make sure that we are on the same page here.
Don't tell me what to
I
do.
think we're getting a little in the weeds.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's super interesting is like I just want to mention the mirror neurons that we all have.
Beyond.
And it's a great like title for them as well, mirror neurons, because all we're doing in life is really being mirrored and mirroring others. Like if you speak and somebody speaks back, it's almost as if like they're mirroring from their context, their background, their isness. And if the mirror says, you're being annoying, so I'm going to take a breather, then like that's pretty much the only thing you're inviting them to do. You're mirroring that to them.
Yeah.
So like when you say, I'm being a certain way, I'm feeling a certain way, I'm going to step back, the mirror is giving that to them as well. That's inviting them to be like, oh yeah, the mirror neurons inside them are like, that's what I'm witnessing right now, is realizing what's happening inside me. And so there is this lack of blame and finger pointing in this more like self-reflection. Because I know a lot of people, when they say self-reflection, it's really reflecting on other people, and which is projection. That's a different thing. So self-reflection is like, here's what I can own, and I can only own my own behavior. And instead of saying you're making me do this, like, no, you're behaving and then I'm behaving. And if I'm not in my center, then the way I'm behaving is 100% my choice. So I think that's such a beautiful thing to acknowledge, as well as just really understanding nonviolent communication. I mean, Marshall Rosenberg, his book is awesome, but even just understanding that title in and of itself, nonviolent communication, a lot of it really in that book, you read it, it's all about self-reflection. When you're speaking, like, this is how what you said made me feel, and I'm feeling this, instead of being like, you're making me feel, or every time you do this, like it's a way of at least putting it on you, which allows for them to mirror that by bringing it back home to them.
Yeah. And clarifying for yourself to them what you think they're saying. So they feel, that's another great way to break up a rhythm and just to make sure you're having an accurate conversation. You say, okay, what I'm hearing from you is this. What I'm inferring from what you're saying is this. Is that right? You can break it up so that they feel heard, they feel acknowledged, and you can proceed with the proper response as a result.
That's some of the hardest shit. When you're in a heated conversation, to not respond immediately and just smack the ping pong ball back into the other corner, it takes a lot of really like checking in with your nervous system, pacing what you're saying, and then really like what you're saying is the same thing that negotiators, when there's a hostage situation, they do mirroring in that respect. When somebody says something, the way to keep them talking is by repeating the last few words that they said, like, blah, 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 and I mean it, or else, somebody's gonna die. It's like, so you mean you're gonna kill somebody if we don't do this? And then they have to clarify it and bring it up again. And you're getting them to rehash what they're willing to do because of what. And then when they say, like, what are your demands? What do you need? And then they say, well, I need blah, 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 and then you mirror it back to them. So you need this, and you invite them in those moments to go deeper into what it is that's happening inside of them. So in a sense, you're doing your own inner, like, as you do your own inner work, and you just, here's what I'm hearing, it causes for them to clarify what's happening inside them. Because most people, if they're triggered, they're not having a good time, right? They may be finally saying what they haven't allowed themselves permission to say in a while, but they're not having a good time. When they feel received, it's the same thing children do. When they don't feel heard, they get louder, and the worst thing that could happen is when they get quieter. And you don't want a child to do that. Like, you don't even want them to get louder, but like if you've pushed a child away or neglected what they're saying for long enough that they get quiet, that's when a real problem starts.
They go dark. I mean,
exactly.
That's when you get Jeffrey Dahmer's.
Well, that's when they realize I don't matter.
And we live in a society right now, I'll say this too. There's a lot of people where their ability, because they want to feel attention, it's trolling. Honestly, provocateurs. The millennial and younger generation, it's all about, I'm going to do something to get a response. Because in a way, it's either trying to pick out your argument or get attention. But really, it's just like, why are we, I get the Michael Malice approach to like controlling being used constructively, but I don't know, it doesn't a lot of times hold weight. But there's so many I've seen, especially in the social media sphere and the internet, that if you run into people who aren't going to be even genuinely trying to have a conversation, to be honest, and are just trying to be a provocateur, I mean, you also got to set your boundaries and just be like, look, man, when you're ready to have a conversation, I'm down. Because it's also about, for me, like, usage of energy where it's right. Because you don't want to waste your energy with people who just want to be vampires and try to get a reaction, and are just trying to instigate. And it's like, look, man, all right, do you? I'm moving on. I got better things to do, like you said, Ben. So a lot of people, if you are running into that too, and you're genuinely trying to have a conversation, especially online in chat rooms where people aren't being confronted in real life, they can hide behind anonymity. Just set boundaries and be like, I'm good. Like when you're ready to have a conversation and be authentic and honest, we can talk. But until then, I'm not going to enable this bullshit. So keep that in mind too with all of our audience. It's only from a place of love, but just like, you got better shit to do with your life. So that's, I think, something else I would just really, for the internet world too, you gotta just be loving, but hold space and hold boundaries too.
And I would encourage people to talk online less. Really, I mean, just in general, I think that social media has been fundamental in destroying our ability to communicate, and is key to the division. Because now we don't have, I like to say that social media, like Facebook, debates, and Twitter, that was like the mask before the actual mask. Because like you're saying, you're hiding. You're not, when you're in a conversation with somebody, you're having an empathetic experience. We relate to each other through faces, which is one of the reasons why the mask was so horrific. But same thing with social media. You can hide behind your keyboard. And it's the worst way to have a constructive conversation, because you cannot see how what you're saying is landing on the person. You can't there's no emotion in typed words. So if you want to have an important conversation with someone in your life, do not have it online, and do not send it as an email. Have the conversation, be brave, and do it in person.
That's super important. Being brave is part of being vulnerable, is being brave. A lot of people think that, like, I'll say whatever to anybody. It's just like, that's not brave. That's a tactic That's a tactic that you've gotten used to. Like, being brave is being vulnerable and speaking to that regardless of how nervous you might feel, or like that's real. What I believe the art of communication is speaking those kinds of truths in the face of resistance, rather than just blowing up and turning it into something like a pissing match or something like that. And I've also noticed that, like, some people, they go around and they think that they're spreading truth, and they don't realize that the way that they speak is what's getting them blocked or canceled. And then they just feel like, well, like, how dare they cancel me? How dare they take that down because I'm just speaking truth? So obviously they're not correct, and obviously they're liars, and blah blah blah.
It's
and
like the guy who's had 4 marriages, and he's like, all these women suck. Or the woman who's had 4 divorces. All the men were terrible pieces of shit. Really, it's all them. It was all those 6 past marriages. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's this one meme, and I love memes. And the next thing I want to talk about,
we got a meme
Monday.
expert in the house.
Yeah. We got to talk about Meme Monday. But there's this one meme that was just like, if everyone around you is an asshole, you're the asshole. Like, if you think about it, there are those people that are just like, everyone's an asshole, man. Everyone I run into is a freaking asshole. And it's just like, I got news for you. It's you. Like, I run into some assholes. I just went to a stick figure concert on Tuesday, and there was this girl there that was just like, she was intentionally trying to be. I'm like, okay, that's an asshole. But, for the most part, I don't really run into those people.
Oh, that's a good
so,
one.
Yeah.
I like this one.
If you don't stop lying, you'll grow up to be a fact checker for Facebook. That's pretty good. Benny, tell us about Meme Monday.
Yeah. I'm super excited about it. It's a total accident. Most of my biggest successes in life are total accidents. But since leaving JoyCamp, because that was an LA thing, and doing the poetry, and then becoming, a family man and a property owner and all this, I still like participating, and I like performing. And I did this one-off video in 2020, in I think June of 2020, and I called it the top 50 coronavirus memes, because memes are the only thing I really like on social media. I go to Instagram and I follow meme accounts. I don't engage in debates or anything like that. I don't like to proselytize on social media, but I love memes, and they are, as someone who's a fan of effective communication, they're a really great way to communicate. It's similar to what I was doing with JoyCamp. You can take a profound idea or a complicated topic or a controversial topic, and it can be distilled down to this, square photo that embodies a really huge message or shows a contradiction or a double standard. And so I did this one-off top 50 coronavirus memes, and it was received so well. I was like, you know what? There's enough memes forever to be able to do this perhaps weekly. So I just started making it a weekly thing, and I've been doing it for 2 years now.
Oh, no.
And it goes over really well. And not only is it fun and funny and a pressure release valve for people, but it documents the times so well.
Yeah.
Because I do this every week, and I spend time throughout the week collecting memes. And I did my best memes of 2021 show to start the year. And in reviewing all the previous episodes, I was like, man, this show is really chronicling the times in real time, because the news cycle is so fast. Things come and go so quickly. But when you reflect on the memes, it's like, man, this is in my show. I'm actually really encapsulating these strange times we're living in really, really well in a really funny way.
Yeah.
So
memes are glorious.
I enjoy doing this. And then I send the memes out to anyone on my mailing list the next morning in a zip drive, so that they can then utilize the memes that they want and put them on their social media platforms, or send them to friends, or send them to whoever. And it's just been a really fun experiment that has, it's going really well.
And it looks like you don't hold punches. It looks like you're keeping it real on both sides, which I appreciate. You're just calling it like you see it, which is how a comedian should truly approach it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
I think memes are super underrated.
Memes
I think it's 100 years from now, they're going to be like, memes were the big thing and they didn't even know it. It's a whole new language we talk to aliens with. Go ahead.
Memes are more effective than you trying to like make some big statement with a Facebook post.
An AI can't track it,
for
right?
better or for worse, that's where we're at. So
yeah,
a meme can capture like, because most things we're dealing with are like double standards and just illogical. Yeah. So if you can capture that essence in a meme, you know, that's all you need. You don't need to like explain
I mean, how can you capture that in words? Vin Diesel, I mean, you can't. That says it all.
Vin Diesel been electric. Dude, my favorite one so far was me. I just killed a giant mouse with a baseball bat, and then it said everybody else at Disneyland, and it was these girls screaming.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that was my favorite one so far.
So there's about 95 memes per episode. So I collect a lot of memes, and I usually have in sections. There's usually depending on what's in the news. Gotcha, so like right now I would have right now it would be
that's one
like a Ukraine section and a COVID section. And then the very last section is all just silly memes.
Gotcha. I love it, dude. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about after this because I think there's a lot of crossover and where we're looking to go with our content. So
yeah. So I mean, you get on my mailing list and you get the memes delivered to your inbox, and it's
I'll pull up
it's an awesome thing. I'm really pleased with how this is developed.
Amazing, man. So yeah, dude. I mean, it looks like you're really everyone go to the website. Is it just bennywills.com?
bennywills.com, and yeah, you can learn about me a little bit. There is some work to be done on some of the website, but yeah, it'll get you to the Parrhesia page. If you're interested in the class I teach, there's a webinar you can watch for free, or you can send me an email. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. And beautiful. More than anything, just get on the mailing list. You know, get on the meme mailing list and watch the show, and every now and then I might send you an update about other things in my life, including the class.
Nice. Last question: are there any thoughts of doing live events?
Sure. I mean,
now we're in a new world, you know. So I'm kind of just asking because, like, are people going to see you at some point in 2022?
Well, because we have a newborn, I have not been exploring options for this year. I mean, every year for the past 7 years, I perform at several, if not many, events or host them. I mean, I've been hired to be the MC of a bunch of conferences now, but I've been leaning more away from that so I could focus on being a good husband and father, and focusing more on how to get, how to make the most of what I can do with what I've built by just sitting here in this chair in my room. And that's been a really good choice, to be honest. But I've been performing on stage since I was 4. It's part of who I am. I can't go too long without creating and without performing. So if the right opportunity presents itself, I'll definitely consider it. And beyond that, I mean, I love bringing people together. I am a community aggregator, people aggregator, and I would love to start hosting events either here in Idaho or elsewhere.
Perfect, man.
Some synergy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, my man, it's been so good to see you after all these years.
Yeah, you too, man. This has been fun.
Yeah. We're definitely going to have to chat. I feel some collaboration in the near future. I'm so glad that you and Stephanie reached out to me on your behalf. Is there any last thing you want to leave the audience with?
Let me think. Oh, that's huge.
Very broad.
Other than sign up for my mailing list, of course. Yeah, here, something I've been telling people a lot lately. I think these are really frustrating and strange times, and we don't know where we're going. But I believe at this point in my life that grappling with evil is a part of the human experience. So while the times we're living in right now may seem extreme or perhaps even worse than any other time, depending on your purview, I think that no matter when you're born, you have to grapple with evil to some extent. And people who are intent on controlling and enslaving, and it's just a part of the deal here. And we can not only overcome that, but we can actually grow from recognizing that and it's part of the learning experience, and we can evolve by recognizing the evil and choosing the other path. And I don't want people to feel hopeless. There's always hope, and just got to ride the wave and figure it out and be around good people.
I feel you. Yeah, man. Surround yourself with that, that which nourishes you. That was Benny Wills, everybody. Incredible. Man, we got to get him back on the podcast because we're going to talk more about, some specifics in comedy next time. But man, I just have to say that having come back from ayahuasca and having my ass handed to me, being humbled in so many ways, it's actually really good to have this conversation, and really talk about communication, because let me be as humble as possible. For the longest time, all I've been is a communicator. And what's interesting is when that's all you are, especially influencer kind of communicator, you learn a lot about what works, and then you stick to what works, and you don't go vulnerable, and you don't venture into territory that actually speaks a deeper truth about yourself. You're just sticking with what has worked in the past. And I really appreciate this conversation. It's really helped me understand that these are universal things that people deal with. And I mean, for me, I don't place it on anyone else out there in the world. I see myself as the biggest and the most important offender of this for me to look at. Because I noticed that, like, as much as I speak of consciousness and, elevating our state and all these kinds of things, at the end of the day, I'm a stressed out dad that's trying to build a business. And ayahuasca journeys can be scary, but I'll tell you, raising kids in this world, trying to eat organic and then building your own business and working for yourself, there's no ayahuasca journey that really compares sometimes.
Oh, man, we're in such similar boats. Totally.
And that's why I love you, Benny.
You too, man.
Parents got to stick together, and this is really the world we're living in.
Yep. I was just telling my students the other day that right now I'm figuring out how to best communicate with a 1-year-old. That's where I'm at. Like, how do I communicate with a kid who is pre-verbal, just learning some words in a way that's effective? And also, just what's the most effective way to communicate with my wife as our lives change? Because, as you know, kids coming into the equation changes everything, and making sure that we always have a healthy dynamic. So my communication evolution right now is in partnership and parenting.
Dude, same. And speaking to children, they don't muck around trying to hide what they're really saying with cleverness. They really don't. Sometimes they learn how to lie and stuff like that, but that's them actually realizing, well, this is what adults do, and they do it all the time. And I can see it plainly. So let me try on this adult thing. So that's the interesting thing is I noticed that. Last thing I'll say is I was dancing around one time with my daughter, and I ended up in my head thinking about stuff. And my daughter was trying to dance with me, and what I was perceiving it as was she kept stepping in front of me as I'm dancing. So this one time I just lightly put my hand on her back and nudged her out of the way, and she clenches her fists and throws down her arms and says, "You're shutting me out, and I don't like how it makes me feel." Wow. This is a 3-year-old girl. And wow. I just dropped to my knees because of so much truth. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. That's exactly what I was doing. And like, to have a 3-year-old call you out in that way, like, yeah, I was just like, whoa, Ben, like, this is what happens when you get in your head. You didn't even think you were doing anything by slightly nudging her out of the way, but the entire time she was connected to how much I was ignoring her. So, geez, have kids if you really want to learn how to communicate effectively.
True.
Man. Okay.
And I think it's the best defense against the New World Order, personally. But it's not for everybody, so I also acknowledge that.
No, I get it. But this is the thing about community, because in the right community, you're going to be around kids anyway. You'll learn how to communicate to young ones in community, because people around you will have kids. Like, you can't escape it. I don't think we should isolate ourselves in cliques, whether it be age, gender, race, belief, anything along those lines.
I agree.
Because when you're an old fogey hanging out with nothing but old fogies, you forget what being a child is really like and what it's really asking of you. So if that's the lasting advice we can give to the audience there, is for sure, just open your mind to different demographics of communication and realize that even though your philosophies and your beliefs may be right, once you broaden them into the greater world, you realize that contextually they're not as relevant. They may be right, but not as relevant. So done with my rant. That was Benny Wills. Holy shit, what an amazing conversation. And if you want to go deeper, go back to the beginning of this podcast and listen to it again, because I thought that we were going to be telling dick and fart jokes the entire time. And no, we really got into communication and the sophistication of how we communicate with one another. So with that being said, I love you all. Thank you for always being in the chat. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for continually coming back. 5 p.m. every single Thursday, we are here with a new guest, giving you as much valuable information as we possibly can in the framework of a casual conversation. With that being said, keep coming back. We'll keep being here, and I'll catch you all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.